Okay, the live stream has started, so welcome everybody. I'll be chairing this hearing of Subcommittee A of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee of Birmingham City Council. I'm Councillor Phil Davis. Before we start, could everybody please mute your microphones for the moment, as this will improve the sound quality while I talk about procedure. And also, could everybody turn off their cameras, with the exception of committee members, unless you're the person speaking. This is to reduce the bandwidth. Committee members normally have their cameras switched on throughout the hearing. If everybody attending today's meeting would make sure their mobile phones are off and ensure they're in a room or environment which is free from distractions or any unnecessary noise emanating from radios, etc., that would assist. And it's vitally important for what I hope are obvious reasons that those attending the meeting and making representations are able to hear me and members of my subcommittee and officers. Any distractions brought to my attention could result in the meeting being suspended temporarily or to another date and time under the regulations for these types of. I can also confirm that this is a public meeting and is therefore being live streamed on the City Council's website so that the general public can view it. The formal order of business is agenda item 1, notice of recording webcast. I advise the meeting to note that this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded they must declare all relevant pecuniary and other registrable interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not participate in any discussion or vote on the matter. Must remain in the room. I must not remain in the room unless they have been granted a dispensation. Okay. Could I ask now of the parties, particularly the persons making representations, do any of the parties making representations wish to withdraw their representations at this stage of the hearing? Mr. Craig?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Puppet?
No, Chair, thank you.
And your colleague, Ms. Murray?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I assume all parties have read and understood the Licensing Committee's procedural rules set out in the notice of today's hearing. Given the nature of the proceedings, I may at my discretion amend the procedural rules to reflect the fact that this meeting is taking place online, but I assure you that any such amendments will not impact on the party's right to a fair hearing. I think everybody's familiar these days with the chat function in Microsoft Teams. That can be used to communicate with us in terms of any issues while we're conducting the hearing. You'll find it in the usual place, the speech bubble on your normal set of controls. What we do at this stage is just confirm attendance by using the chat function. So if you could go into chat and simply write your name, that would be very helpful. Thank you. So I'm just going to do the same. I see everybody's typing that in, so thank you very much for that. I will follow suit. It takes a little bit of time, and then that's a helpful record. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for that. Let's just get back to the main screen. Okay, thank you very much. And please keep the chat column open for the duration of the meeting so that you can follow the messages being posted in the chat. I don't think we have anybody dialed in on audio telephones. We don't have that complication. With the exception of subcommittee members, please keep your camera off unless you're the person speaking. If there are any problems with bandwidth which cause problems with the sound, I may at my discretion ask everyone to have their cameras off. Okay, so we're now on to preliminary points. Mr. Craig, have you got any preliminary points you wish to make?
No, Chair. I note that your committee service put the supporting documents up on the website, so you'll have had sight of those.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Edge, had you got any procedural issues, preliminary points? Mr. Edge? Okay, we need to check that Mr. Edge is receiving us loud and clear.
Chair, it seems as though Mr. Edge has left the meeting.
Oh dear.
I'll see if I can contact him.
Yeah, okay, we'll stop proceedings for the moment until we can get communication re-established. you. I need to go back to some of the initial items just to introduce the hearing today. Is the live stream back on? Yes. Okay, welcome to the hearing of Subcommittee A of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee, Birmingham City Council. This is a formal meeting of the council, and obviously we're being webcast for later subsequent broadcast via the council's meeting YouTube site. We have dealt with declarations of interest. Apologies were submitted on behalf of Councillor Simon Morrell, and Councillor Adam Higgs is the nominated substitute member today. I'm sitting today. I'm Councillor Philip Davis, the chair of the subcommittee. I'm sitting with Councillor Higgs and Councillor Mary Locke. Item 4 of the formal agenda was to note the minutes of the public part of the meeting held on the 16th of January 2023 at 10:00 hours and confirm and sign the minutes as a whole, and to do likewise with the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of January. That's a repetition, 23rd of January 2023 at 10:00 hours, and to confirm and sign the minutes as a whole. Okay, so can I welcome you again to this hearing for an application in respect of New Wish Lounge, 81 Eyre Street, Ladywood, Birmingham, B1872. As I said, I'm Councillor Philip Davis. I'm chairing the meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee today, and I've introduced the members of the subcommittee, Councillor Locke and Councillor Higgs. Also present in the meeting are the following officers: the Licensing Officer, Bhupinder Andra, the Committee Manager, Ms. Katie Townsend, and the Committee Lawyer, Ms. Joanne Swan.
The moment. It's only when I speak I turn the camera.
Sorry, we can hear you, Mr. Edge. So you're broadcasting there. If you want to mute while we're doing the other business, that would help. Thank you. So I'll now ask the parties to identify themselves. Firstly, the applicant. The applicant is Mr. Shaban Abbas Ali. Mr. Ali, are you able to hear us?
Hello.
Okay, thank you. And your representative is Mr.
Hello,
Rob.
I'm here.
Okay, thanks. Your representative is Mr. Rob Edge. Mr. Edge? Yes.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then those making representations are Immediate Care Medical, represented by Mr. That is Louise Morrie and Steve Poppet. Ms. Morrie and Mr. Poppet, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Poppet?
Yes, Chair, I'm here too.
Okay, thank you. And then Urban Workspace, Ms. Sharon Murphy, represented by Mr. Duncan Craig. And Mr. Craig, I can see you're present.
That's good to hear. And I'm a little bit warmer than Mr. Edge looks presently. And I've got Sharon with me now, and also I've got Kerry, just so everybody knows, I've got Kerry Cox, who is one of my two associates, who's with me today. So we're all here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I've dealt with the representations withdrawal. I've dealt with the procedural rules and the preliminary points. Actually, Mr. Edge, when you lost contact with us, we were inviting those making representations or those present to make any preliminary points if they wish to about procedure. Did you have any preliminary points, Mr. Edge?
No, none from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so the procedure will be, as usual, firstly, the licensing officer, Mr. Nandra, will present the report. Then the applicant will be asked to present their case. We're asking it be kept to approximately 20 minutes. Next, those making representations will be invited to present their case. And again, we ask that be kept to approximately 20 minutes. And again, if all parties can speak slowly and clearly, that will assist the recording here today. And again, if it's any time it's somebody else's turn to speak, please mute your microphone and use the chat function if necessary. But you can intervene in the usual way to get my attention. Members of the subcommittee will be able to ask questions at any stage, but we'll try to do so at the conclusion of each presentation. Cross-examination by the applicant and those making representations will not be permitted unless the members consider it appropriate. I've dealt with the chat facility access. Legal advice. Could I point out that occasionally it may be necessary for the subcommittee to take legal advice. At my discretion, I may ask all parties to wait in this meeting while members and the relevant officers will be able to take legal advice using a separate meeting with Microsoft Teams. We'll then return to this meeting and continue. If the live stream being broadcast on the City Council's website fails, I'll ask you all to mute your microphones and cameras and to stop speaking until the live stream is restored. In the context of any adjournment to take legal advice, we will pause the live stream. Okay, at the conclusion of the meeting, I'll invite all parties to make a brief closing submission. No decision will be taken until all the evidence has been heard. At the decision-making stage, the members and the relevant officers will withdraw from this meeting in order to determine the decision. They'll go into a separate Microsoft Teams meeting. In the event that the members need to clarify any point, you'll be telephoned by the meeting manager. The members will then make their decision. You'll be notified of the decision of the subcommittee within 5 working days. Okay, that's the process. So what I'd like to do now is move straight to the meat of the hearing, and I'll ask Mr. Bhupinder Nandra to present his report, please. Mr. Nandra.
Thank you, Chair. Siobhan Abbas Ali applied on the 17th of January 2023 for the grant of a premises licence for You Wish Lounge, 81 Eyre Street, Ladywood, Birmingham, B18 7AD. The purpose of the report is to consider the representations that have been made in respect of an application for a premises licence which seeks to permit the provision of regulated entertainment consisting of live music, recorded music, performances of dance and anything of a similar description to operate indoors only from 6 p.m. until 12 midnight Monday to Sunday, to permit the provision of late night refreshment to operate from 11 p.m. until 12 midnight Monday to Sunday, with the premises to remain open to the public from 6 p.m. until 12 midnight Monday to Sunday. Other dates and times are specified in the application form. Representations have been received from other persons which are attached at Appendices 1 and 2. The application is attached at Appendix 3, site location plans at Appendix 4. When carrying out its licensing functions, a licensing authority must have regard to Birmingham City Council Statement of Licensing Policy and the guidance issued by the Secretary of State under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003. The licensing authority is also required to take such steps as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. The options available to the subcommittee today are to grant the licence in accordance with the application, to reject the application, to grant the licence subject to conditions modified to such an extent as considered appropriate, or exclude from the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Edge, we now come to you and your client to make your presentation. If you'd like to address the committee, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Chair. Acting for the applicant, I've given full regard to the representations made against this application, the licensing objectives as set out in the Licensing Act 2003, the Council Statement of Licensing Policy, and the guidance issued under Section 182 of the Act, December 2022. Of the responsible authorities, who are your experts assessing applications, none have objected. This is a sign they all believe that this is a good application with a robust operating schedule, which does not give them cause for concern. I fully understand the objectors' concerns, of which their main concern is in relation to parking. You will know it is not generally within the subcommittee's gift to consider traffic-related issues. However, you will see that the applicant has gone beyond demonstrating due diligence by leasing the car park opposite the premises. It should also be noted that the car park was in a very bad state and that he has commenced work on bringing it up to a better standard, namely replacing the old chainmail fence to the front with a proper steel fence, clearing debris from the car park, which has a capacity for approximately 40 to 45 cars. He has so far invested £4,500 on refurbishing and replacing the fence and carrying out work within this site. Additionally, there are policies and procedures being put in place to ensure that the venue fully upholds the licensing objectives. I strongly believe this venue can and will be an asset to the area, with a strong management team behind it and robust policies being in place. The management team will always ensure that they uphold and promote the licensing objectives and step up to the mark. When we talk about diversification of offer in the nighttime economy, it's essential to ensure there's an offer for all ages and all tastes. The applicant intends to run the venue in a professional manner. They have invested time, money and passion to make this a success for the city without compromising on the licensing objectives. And it should be noted that alcohol was not requested within the licensable activities. This concludes my submission, unless you have any further questions for myself or the applicant, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edge. Councillor Higgs, have you got any questions?
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Locke.
I think just one of my usual questions. Will the applicant, how will waste be disposed of? What sort of times of the day or night will that be?
Beg your pardon, Councillor?
Can I just ask how the applicant will arrange for waste to be collected? During what times of day or night?
What times of day will what occur? Sorry, Councillor.
Collection of waste.
As far as I know, they're in consultation with a waste management company, but haven't defined the timings. But waste would certainly not be removed in general outside of working hours.
Okay.
Okay, is that all your questions, Councillor Locke?
Yeah, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah. Just one question from me, Mr. Edge. In terms of the business model, what's the main activity? There's an application for refreshments, there's an application for entertainment. I mean, is it, for example, going to be a shisha lounge?
That isn't presently planned. No, it's a coffee bar with a relatively large kitchen at the rear and just a place for people to congregate, sit, eat and drink coffee or soft refreshments.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Chair, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, certainly.
Mr. Edge, does the applicant have any previous experience, and if so, what?
The applicant does. His previous experience was predominantly in convenience stores, and he had a chain of 4 of those and is a personal licence holder for a number of years, Chair. Joanne.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, I think that's all our questions for the moment. So thank you very much for that. So I'll now move on to those making representations. And what I'd like to do is go to Urban Workspace first and Mr. Craig. Mr. Craig, would you like to make your representations on behalf of your client?
Thank you, Chair. I know the area pretty well, actually. I lived until a couple of years ago, I lived up the road in the Jewellery Quarter, and so I know this parcel well. And in fact, I got the, not something I particularly can boast about, I'm afraid, I got the Cross Keys licence about 2 years ago. So I know that there are a lot of problems in this area that you wouldn't necessarily expect. It's not an uncommon phenomenon. It's certainly no fault of the applicant. But various parts of the city that attract quite a lot of trouble from licensable activities simply aren't policed. on a weekend in particular. I mean, Digbeth, frankly, has an extremely low level of police activity on a weekend. So it's given limited resources West Midlands Police have, it's difficult to expect them to police this area. But there are a number of issues in this area that my client, Open Workspace, and I know the other objectors have, which we feel, and the applicant feels, the objector, my client feels, simply haven't been addressed in the application. Mr. Edge, when making his initial preamble, said that due consideration had been given to your statement of licensing policy and the Section 182 guidance. But no disrespect to Mr. Edge, he's extremely experienced. But clearly it's my job to pick any holes I can find in the application. First of all, it makes reference to the sale of alcohol. Now, I know Mr. Edge has tried to explain that by way of saying that there's going to be potentially be TENs and that they could be applied to these particular premises. But given the fact it's been described as a coffee lounge, which I have to say, you're not here to evaluate the viability of a business, but I'm struggling to see how a coffee lounge is going to survive in this particular part of Birmingham. On that basis, I'm struggling to see what the relevance of any alcohol-related conditions are, and if TENs are enough of a consideration, then again I have to wonder what the purpose of this application is. So I raise that particular point now. Obviously, it's noted. The assumption was at this end, certainly everything that my client has heard and has been led to believe is that this is going to be a shisha lounge. If Mr. Edge says that isn't the case, well, obviously, no reason to disbelieve that, and obviously that's been noted. But certainly, if shisha were to be considered at any point in the future, then obviously the building itself would need to be compliant with the relevant regulations. Just looking at the application itself, and obviously what we're dealing with here is an hour. We're dealing with between 11 o'clock and midnight, 7 days a week. But equally, that doesn't mean that the licensing objectives don't need to be promoted in an appropriate way. I just make the point, first of all, the plan that's been submitted, in fact, that's contained at page 22.
Yes, thanks.
In the agenda pack. Obviously, one of the requirements under the Licensing Act, Premises Licence and Clubs Premises Certificates Regulations 2005 is that a plan identifies where all firefighting equipment is. Well, all I can see there is one F, a singular F, which denotes where the firefighting equipment is or the fire safety equipment. But one would expect in any premises of this size that there would be smoke alarms, there would be fire extinguishers, there would be emergency exit signs. There would perhaps be a board that monitored all of these things. None of those things are provided for within that plan, and so obviously I'm duty bound to question the plan for a start, because if that is a true representation of the extent of the firefighting equipment, then I have to say I'm struggling to see how that is promoting the public safety licensing objective. Turn to the issue of parking. Now, there is an issue with parking in the area, and it's a huge issue. And you've seen the supporting documents that have been submitted by Urban Workspace. There are a number of photos. It's mental around here. It's quiet till about 2 a.m, and then all of a sudden a load of cars descend in the local area. It may be that there's activities going on that aren't necessarily within the scope or within the purview of the relevant responsible authorities. Well, why that's an issue for my client, and whilst parking is not a licensable activity, there's no doubt that parking issues are and can be a matter of public nuisance. There's no question of that. And obviously, the more licensed premises there are in an area, the more potential there is for those things to impact on public nuisance. A load of those cars get dumped here. They're dumped here on a Sunday, and they're sometimes still here on a Tuesday, and they cause significant problems. Now, I know that the applicant has made reference to the parking. My client just simply does not agree that the car park looks, frankly, any different than it did a few months ago, certainly in terms of the surface of it. But notwithstanding that, and given the fact that representations make specific reference to parking, it doesn't seem to me that there's been any effort to deal with that. And I know that within Mr. Edge's representation, within his supporting documents, there is a noise management plan, but there's no dispersals policy in there, which one would ordinarily expect in any large licensed premises, and this is a large licensed premise, and one would certainly expect that in a place where the issue of parking and people leaving the premises and public nuisance was raised to that extent. So it's a little disappointing that no consideration appears to have been given to dispersals policy. And again, the issue around rubbish and the clearance of refuse, given the huge problems that my client has clearing up empty bottles here on a Monday morning, then given that, again, one would have expected perhaps more application and purpose to be given to that part of the objections that were raised. So my client, on the face of it, has significant issues with these premises, but those concerns that they have become accentuated by what they see as the inconsiderate behaviour of the applicant during the period where the works have been carried out. You'll see there is a further photograph. I think it's at the end of the supporting documents on behalf of Urban Workspace, which shows a load of debris that's just leaned up against my client's wall. That is just one example in a series of examples of what my client views the inconsiderate behaviour of the applicant in the course of the last few months. So you obviously have to make a decision today about an hour's worth of licensable activities, but my client has genuine concerns that the problem in the area will get worse. And I would add to that whilst this isn't in a cumulative impact area, you are entitled to take the cumulative impact of licensable activities into account. Paragraph 14.42 in the Section 182 guidance deals with that, and I'm sure you'll be given appropriate advice from your legal advisor when you deliberate, and to take that into account. And obviously you'll also take into account paragraphs 8.41 to 8.49 as to whether this particular application deals with the concerns that have been raised adequately, and you'll take whatever steps, of course you will, to ensure that the licensing objectives are adequately promoted. So my client has two principal concerns. Firstly, that the issue of nuisance from debris, rubbish, patrons spilling out, and cars is going to get even worse as a consequence of these premises, and that the applicant hasn't applied their mind sufficiently to that, and that gives rise to a further concern about the consideration that the applicant will give to their neighbours once the premises is open. I mean, it can still open without a licence, of course. You'll only be denying them an hour of activity based on the application if you refuse this application. So you won't be denying them the ability to open the business, just simply an hour. And the attitude of the applicant throughout the course of the last few months gives my clients genuine concerns. What they're paying for me today. This isn't a frivolous whimsical objection to an application. That these concerns are real. My client has genuine concerns about the suitability of this applicant to engage with the licensing objectives in an appropriate way. So that's all I have to say, Chair. So obviously, if you've got any questions, then Sharon's here to field any of them.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Craig. Councillor Locke, have you got any questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Higgs?
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Just one from me, Mr. Craig. Given the nature of this area, which I know well, given that I've lived in the jury quarter not far from here.
We might have been neighbours, Chair.
Oh, well, we might have been somewhere in Fleet Street, but not too far. But I know the location reasonably well. So I'm just asking the question here about the impact in terms of activity in the wee small hours on, well, whom? And that's my question, because this is not a residential area. I'm not preempting the issue here, but I just wanted to get your view on this. How is any activity regulated, or well regulated or not well regulated, likely to have an impact on your client in terms of the hours which we're being asked to approve here?
I'll let Sharon answer that in a second, but as I understand it, and obviously I've had detailed discussions, it's twofold. It's the debris in the area from people just leaving rubbish, empty bottles, and stuff along those lines. And note, there's nothing in the operating schedule that deals with the removal and the clearing of rubbish. And secondly, it's the abandonment of cars. It's not just the case that people come in at 4 a.m. and you come again in the morning and none of the cars are here. Some of them are here and some of them are blocking entrances, and it's a lack of management around that. Look, no license holder, look, as you know, Chair, I principally represent the trade, and no license holder is ever going to have going to be able to completely manage the activities of their patrons at all times. But what you tend to find is applicants who demonstrate a more robust approach to matters such as these, we tend to get less problems with. And the concern is here that there's been no application made to these particular issues, or insufficient application made to these particular issues. And that's my client's concern. But I will let Sharon, so I'm going to turn the laptop round and just let Sharon, if you're okay to do that, Sharon? Yes, I'm glad to do that. There we go.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. Yeah. Do you want me to just say what the impact is, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so
that would be helpful to the committee. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so obviously we have cars that get abandoned, and we have struggles getting in and out of the premises sometimes. Not so much us here, but other tenants down the road. They just park wherever they want to park, and then they abandon they go off because they've had a few beers, which, it's the right thing to do, leave the car. However, they don't come back for it for a few days, so that car is then stuck in the way of businesses operating. Rubbish on Mondays is absolutely appalling. I mean, I myself spend at least an hour and a half outside, just outside Urban Workspace, collecting not just rubbish. There's all sorts of things that I won't mention, but some of it's disgusting. They urinate up against the cladding. There's people doing all sorts. They're vomiting up our cladding. They're doing all sorts of things. And quite frankly, for an hour and a half of my time every Monday, I feel like I'm cleaning up after a party that I've not been invited to.
Okay.
I'm not happy.
Okay, I get the feeling. Although this is not obviously anything to do with the current applicant, because their premises are not.
I'm just saying, at the moment that's it down here, and it's all down Eyre Street. If we have the same at Cope Street, it's going to cause more problems. That's what I'm saying. I see it down these two streets, and there's something at the back of us is going to cause possibly another problem.
All right.
That's
Thank you very much.
So, Chair, if I could just convert that, I'll be very brief. I could just convert that into Section 182 language. My client's concern is the cumulative impact of these premises, should this licence be granted, is such that it's going to exacerbate the current situation that is terrible, and my client does not feel that the applicant has taken those concerns seriously in respect of the operating schedule and the steps that they could have taken in respect of dispersals, in respect of clearing of rubbish, which gives them concerns, and those concerns have been accentuated by the behaviour of the applicant during the schedule of the works. So that's essentially using Section 182 language. That's what Sharon's saying.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Craig. So that's your presentation then.
It is, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Edge, I see you've got your hand up there, but you'll have the opportunity to reply to all these points in the summing up at the end. I will allow enough time for that. So I'd rather move forward now.
Certainly. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so now I come to immediate care medical. Ms. Murray and Mr. Poppet. Which of you would like to speak first? Mr. Poppet?
Yes, Chair, I'll speak on behalf of immediate care. Whilst I can't speak with the same level of legal knowledge as Mr. Craig, the concerns raised by immediate care, who are adjacent to the car park, which is directly opposite the business premises itself, is that we operate a 24/7 ambulance service, which requires access during those periods of time, not only for the ambulance vehicles, excuse me, but also for the staff that park in Eyre Street. Eyre Street, as you will know, during the day is very, very populated with vehicles due to the business premises that operate there, and there are also a number of abandoned vehicles that are remaining in the street as well. The concern of immediate care is obviously access to our own premises and our staff to and from that location as well. The car park that has been described by Mr. Edge, yes, I would agree and concur that in the recent weeks there has been a number of man hours adding the fencing to that car park. However, the surface remains pretty poor and there is limited or in fact no street lighting on that car park itself. I took the opportunity to go and speak to Mr. Ali about a fortnight ago, very disappointed that nobody from the premises had actually made any inquiries with other business premises as to what the nature of their business was and the impact that potentially the premises itself could have on those areas. Until the objection was raised, I got the general impression that Mr. Ali didn't realise that this was a 24/7 operating business and involved ambulances. What I did say to him and spoke to him about, and he did indicate at that time that the premises itself would be, as has been described, a coffee lounge, soft drinks, light refreshments, and he also did include the provision of shisha, and we had a general conversation around how shisha was smoked and things like that. So to deny that it's being used, will be used as a shisha lounge at this stage, is contradictory to the conversation I had with Mr. Ali. Mr. Ali further indicated that his prospective clients were high-end or upper-class people and not general people of a lower class, and described that the vehicles that would be attending would be high-range vehicles, and he used makes and manufacturers such as Ferrari and high-end vehicles as well. My concern would be if you've got a multi-thousand-pound vehicle, £100,000 vehicle plus, are you going to be inclined to park it on a very uneven car park surface, and particularly one with low-level lighting? The inclination is you're going to be parking it as close to the premises itself, where there will be CCTV for protecting that vehicle itself. Mr. Ali indicated to me that there was a lot of parking space along Eyre Street itself outside business premises, which, yes, during the evening and wee small hours of the morning would be pretty well empty. However, any vehicles left beyond that period would have significant impact on other local businesses who I am fairly sure are unaware of this application, because we only became aware of it by a small notice that had been sellotaped to the front of the premises itself. There'd been no consultation with other local businesses or in fact any communication with. The reason I went and spoke to Mr. Ali is I adopted the stance was what I would do with any disagreement with a neighbour at home. I'd go and speak to them in the first instance to understand and try and find an amicable solution to it. Unfortunately, whilst Mr. Ali was very amenable and we had quite a very good conversation, I didn't leave that with any satisfaction that the concern or the concerns that we've raised were addressed. Although can say that he has spent considerable amount of money on the premises and has significant pride in what he has done in the refurbishment of the building itself. Again, I'll reiterate the concerns that we would have is that the carriageway and the roadway itself would be subject to litter and debris. I note the question raised by Councillor Locke in relation to the timings of waste collection, and the response was between normal operating hours. Is that normal operating hours of the business, normal operating hours of the waste collection management company, or it wasn't a particularly satisfactory answer for me in terms of that. All the clinical waste from this premises is coordinated, and we do it at times that has little or no impact on other businesses as well in the area. Mr. Ali indicated obviously that there were 40 parking spaces on that car park itself. Although the premises itself is quite extensive, I'm unsure how many that premises is likely to contain, but I would suggest, having been invited in, it would contain more than the occupants of 40 vehicles. And the concern is, what is the overspill should people then be directed to and onto that car park itself? And finally, on behalf of immediate care, the management here are that concerned in relation to the blocking of access and egress to this premises, that if the application is approved, then the management here would be considering hiring additional security or staff to patrol the external of the premises to ensure that the access and egress to this building is not obstructed, which again I feel is an additional measure that the premises would have to take through no fault of their own, just to maintain business as usual. Hopefully that explains the reasons for our objections. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Poppet. So you're speaking to Ms. Murray as well? Absolutely, yes. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. So there may be some questions from members. So Councillor Higgs, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Locke?
No, that was very clear to me. Thank you, Chair.
So, Mr. Poppet, just on your business model, you're actually, when you talk about 24/7 and all-night access, is this access for actual ambulances or similar vehicles?
Yes, Chair. It's a private medical company that supplies additional resources to NHS facilities, ambulance trusts. So that is a frontline ambulance facility as well. The primary function of the business also is events management, so providing medical resources to events, and also passenger transport. Whilst it isn't an ambulance station as such with constant 24/7 vehicles coming and going, the shift times and the responsibilities and the commitments to other areas of not only the West Midlands but the wider Midland area means we will have staff coming and going and ambulances arriving and leaving at sporadic times throughout the 24-hour clock.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've had the representations, and now we come to summing up. And this is normally 5 minutes, but I mean, I will allow the necessary time to deal with any key points. What I'd like to do is go to Mr. Craig first. Mr. Craig, do you wish to sum up briefly?
I won't trouble you for 5 minutes, Chair. Look, licensable activity, the Licensing Act is ultimately, I've said this spiel to you a number of times, Chair, I'm doing it from a different perspective today, but it doesn't alter the central truth to the Licensing Act, that it's about the balancing exercise between the legitimate business interests of Mr. Ali and the people who his business will impact upon. And those people who are more impacted by his activities will be those that are closest to him. That's nothing unique to these particular premises. And my client, and Steve as well, has very eloquently put his position across too, just does not accept or believe that this business has considered their concerns sufficiently, which is why we are still here today and why matters haven't been resolved between the parties. So it's a matter for you, Chair, to evaluate whether you feel that sufficient steps have been taken, and if you don't feel they have, either for you to take those steps on behalf of the application as you are given the power to do, or if your concerns are so great around that, and obviously concerns have been raised by more than one party in the local area, then obviously you have the option to reject the application. It doesn't mean the business won't be able to open. It just simply means that it won't be authorised to carry on licensable activities from 11 at night until until midnight. So I would just invite you to ask that question of yourselves, please, councillors. Has this applicant considered and taken into account the concerns that have been raised in the objections a month ago, give or take? And if you don't feel that they have, does that demonstrate to you that they are a suitable person to hold a licence in this city? And thank you for listening this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. So back to Mr. Poppet. Mr. Poppet, do you want to just sum up your particular representation?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. No, I've got nothing additional to add. Obviously, I feel that Mr. Craig has said his piece, and I've hopefully said as much as I needed to say during my initial submission.
Okay. Thank you very much. So now I come to Mr. Edge. Mr. Edge representing the applicant, of course, for the final word. Mr. Edge, I'll give you a little more time to answer the points that have been raised. There's a number of points there for you to address, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So to address a couple of points that were raised, within the application under prevention of public nuisance in the operating schedule, we had said that premises staff will ensure the frontage of the restaurant is checked regularly for litter and rubbish, clearing any debris away. Additionally, that no rubbish, including bottles, shall be removed or placed in outside areas between 2300 and 0800. And we're quite happy to amend those timings if members thought that would be necessary. With regards to the car park is an ongoing piece of work. To date, the applicant has spent £4,500 replacing the fencing to the frontage of the car park, removing rubbish that was within the car park, and is now in the process of appointing a contractor to resurface the car park. He was fully aware of the ambulance service, and I didn't find out until after I'd submitted the application, but actually they've allocated a steward to the frontage of the premises to monitor parking of vehicles, particularly to escort vehicles in to make sure that they park properly within the car park and don't block each other. And since having spoken to Mr. Poppet, they're now adding to the steward's role that he's to ensure that immediate care medical's frontage is permanently left free so that vehicles don't cause any disturbance and block the ambulances in. With regard to the point that Mr. Craig made on the plans and the fire equipment, the plans were drawn prior to the fire officer's visit, and the applicant has located firefighting equipment within the premises according to the recommendations of the fire officer, and the fire officer was happy enough and the distribution and the types of fire equipment, including hardwired fire alarms, that there was no reason for him to give representations. I fully take on board the point Mr. Craig also made about a dispersal plan, and the applicant is willing to volunteer as a condition that a dispersal plan will be in place that will involve traffic management. The applicant intends to continue to engage with both of the objectors and with other neighbours to ensure that they all sort of live harmoniously together and that the premises doesn't give cause to concern, particularly about noise, nuisance or traffic management. As I said, the management team there have and are ongoing, drawing up policies and procedures to ensure that they run effectively and efficiently and that there are the appropriate measures in place. The premises doesn't open until 6 p.m. It closes at 12 o'clock and is very much unlike other premises within Stewart Street or any of the other licensed premises that are within the area. I think that covers the key points. And that there is no intention. There was some thought about going into Shisha, but Mr. Chavan has been advised by me that he would need to have gone through planning for the correct extractions for those, and therefore it's not something that's intended for use in the premises in the current time. So that concludes my final summary, Chair, unless there are any questions from you or other members.
Okay, no, this is the summing up, so that would be the completion of the presentations.
Chair, may I just make one point, because Mr. Edge has thrown the steward situation in. Obviously, that's news to me, news to my client. I mean, can I just seek clarification? Is that from 6 p.m. till midnight, 7 days a week? There'll be a permanent steward outside the front of the premises. Is that what you're offering, Mr. Edge?
Mr. Edge?
That's correct, yes. And as I say, that wasn't in the original operating schedule, Mr. Craig, because it was something that came out in conversation with the applicant after the objections had come in, and after Mr. Poppett's visit to the premises, that the applicant wanted to demonstrate a higher level of due diligence and to allay concerns they had about people parking in front of the ambulance bays. And I fully concur with their offer there.
Okay, and we'll just make the point. It's been offered in your summary, not Mr. Edge, not in your presentation, but anyway. Okay, well, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Okay, that is the evidence to the hearing today. So I thank everybody for their contributions, particularly Mr. Edge and Mr. Craig and Mr. Poppet. We will now adjourn, and I'll ask all parties to leave the MS Teams meeting, and the members of the committee law and the committee manager will go into private session while the subcommittee makes its decision. You'll be notified of the decision within 5 working days. So that is the end of the public proceedings. Colleagues, I suggest just 5-minute gap for comfort break, and then we'll reconvene in our pre-meeting Teams meeting. Thank you again, everybody. I close the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.